My name is Myra Fuller, and I'm 70 years old. 18 months ago, my daughter sat at my kitchen table and cried until I handed her husband $180,000. That money was my retirement. Last spring, when I finally asked for it back, my son-in-law smiled at me and said, "Mom, family doesn't send each other invoices." My daughter called me selfish. Derek's mother stood in my own living room and told everyone I was trying to shame my child over money. They thought they were arguing with a sweet, forgetful old woman. They figured I'd cave by Sunday supper. They forgot one thing about me. Before I was anyone's grandmother, I spent 40 years deciding which loans were safe and how a bank gets its money back when they aren't. So I didn't argue with them. I made one phone call to someone I trained a very long time ago. And what happened at Derek's big reopening party in front of his new investor and the county newspaper, none of them saw it coming. I'm not proud of all of it, but I'd do it again. Let me start at the beginning, back when I still thought love meant never asking. I live alone now in the house Tom and I bought in 1981. He's been gone 7 years. The quiet still surprises me some mornings. Hartwell is a small town. Everyone knows me as Mrs. Fuller, the lady with the good garden and the soft voice. I let them think that. It's easier. Last winter, I made a decision. I'm 70, my knees are tired, and the stairs are getting longer every year. So I put a deposit down at Lindenwood Commons, a retirement community out on Route 9. Sunny rooms, a little library, people my own age who play a vicious game of bridge. The full deposit is $48,000 due in 60 days. I'd planned for that. I'd planned for all of it. People think a woman my age just hopes the numbers work out. I never hoped. I counted. Part of that count was simple. 18 months ago, I'd lent money to my daughter's husband. The repayment was supposed to start last January, a little over $5,000 a month. That money wasn't extra. It was the bridge between the house I'm selling and the life I'd picked out for myself. I had it all on a single page, in a folder the color of cream, in the second drawer of Tom's old desk. I'd read enough loan files in my life to know exactly what mine said. I just never imagined I'd have to use it. Every other Sunday, I drive to Brianna's for supper. It's 20 minutes past the reservoir. Brianna is 41. She has her father's laugh and my stubbornness, which is a hard combination to live with. Her husband Derek is 38, all energy and big plans. They have 2 kids, Ellie's 12 and Sam's 9, and I'd cross a frozen river for either of them. That Sunday, the kitchen smelled like pot roast. Derek was holding court at the head of the table. "We're expanding the roastery," he said. "Second location, maybe a third." Vine and Ember is his coffee business. He opened it in 2021. To hear him tell it, the place prints money. "That's wonderful," I said. "I meant it." Brianna squeezed my hand. "It's really happening, Mom." The kids talked over each other about a school trip. Sam knocked over his milk. It was a good night, the kind I'd been afraid I wouldn't get many more of. Then I said the wrong thing, gently, over coffee. "Derek, that repayment schedule we set," I said, "the one starting in January. Could we look at it together sometime?" Something flickered across his face and went still. He reached for the cream. "Sure, Mom," he said, "soon." He didn't look at me when he said it. Brianna started clearing plates a little too fast. I drove home that night telling myself I was imagining things. I wasn't. I just didn't want to be right yet. Let me take you back 18 months to the night this started. It was December of 2024. Brianna came to my house alone, which was unusual. She sat at my kitchen table and she cried. "The bank turned Derek down," she said. "He needs a bigger roaster, a real space. If he doesn't move now, he loses the lease." I asked how much. $180, she said. "I know it's huge, Mom. It's his whole shot. It's our whole shot." I knew what $180,000 was. I knew it down to the decimal. It was most of what I'd built in the retirement account, the slow way, over decades. Pulling it out early meant a tax bill too. Thousands more I'd never see again. I didn't tell Brianna that part. A mother doesn't itemize her sacrifices at the table. I also knew my daughter's face. I'd watched her at 4 with a skinned knee and at 16 with a broken heart. This was worse than both. This was a woman afraid her husband was failing. "All right," I said. She started to thank me. I held up a hand. "If we do this," I said, We do it properly, not as a handout, as a loan on paper, like grown people. She nodded fast. Of course, whatever you want. I think she would have agreed to anything that night. Most people would. That's exactly why you put it on paper before the tears dry. I told her I'd have something drawn up by the weekend. She hugged me at the door and called me the best mom in the world. I'd remember that line later, so would she. We signed that next Saturday at the same kitchen table. I'd had a simple promissory note prepared. 1 page. $180,000. 4% interest. 12 months before any payment was due. Then 36 months to pay it back. Fair terms. Kinder than any bank. Derek read it for about 9 seconds. You really did the whole thing, huh? He said, and laughed. Let's make it official, Mom. That was his idea, the official part. I want to be clear about that. He's the one who reached for the pen. The pen was Tom's. A black fountain pen, gold nib, the one he'd used to sign our mortgage in 1981 and Brianna's college checks and his own will. I keep it in a velvet sleeve. I don't let just anyone touch it. That night I let Derek. He signed with a flourish like a man signing autographs. Brianna signed as witness. I signed last, slow, the way Tom taught me. There was one more line near the bottom in the language I'd used 10,000 times in my working life. Derek's eyes slid right past it. Brianna's, too. It described what the loan was secured against. The equipment, the roaster, the things the money was buying. Neither of them asked what it meant. People never do when they're happy. I folded the note into the cream-colored folder. I put the folder in Tom's desk. I honestly believed I'd never open it again. The first payment was due in January of this year, a little over $5,000. January came, no payment, no call. I told myself they were busy. February, the same. By March, I'd signed the Lindenwood paperwork, and the $48,000 deposit had a due date of its own. So in April, I asked. Plainly, I called Derek on a Tuesday. The payments were supposed to start in January, I said. I need to start counting on them now. My deposit's coming due, and the house won't close until fall. There was a pause on the line. I've sat through 1,000 pauses like it. They never mean anything good. Mom, he said, warm as ever. Family doesn't send each other invoices. I held the phone and let that sit. It wasn't an invoice, Derek, I said. It was a loan. You signed it. We were all emotional that night, he said. Brianna and I never thought of it as some bank thing. Your family. We figured you were happy to help. Happy to help. I'd heard those words my whole career, usually from people explaining why they shouldn't have to pay. I am happy to help, I said. I'm also 70, and I've got a deposit due in June. We'll figure it out, he said. Don't stress about it. Stress is bad at your age. He hung up first. I stood in my kitchen a long time. Then I went and looked at the calendar on the fridge. 60 days. I started counting. Brianna called me 2 days later. She did not sound like a woman who'd cried at my table. Mom, Derek says you're pressuring him about the money. I asked about the repayment we agreed to, I said. That isn't pressure. He's drowning in this expansion, and you're worried about a deposit at some old folks' home? It's my home now, I said. I picked it. I paid for part of it. I need the rest. She made a sound I hadn't heard from her since she was 16. God, Mom, you're being so selfish. There it was, the word. The next Sunday, Derek's mother was at the table. Lorraine, 66, sharp dresser, sharper tongue. She'd clearly been briefed. Myra, she said before I'd even sat down, you'd really shame your own daughter over money? The kids were in the next room. I kept my voice low. I'm not shaming anyone, I said. I asked to be repaid for a loan. Real family doesn't charge interest, Lorraine said, like scripture. I almost laughed. 4%. I'd turned down grown men who begged me for that rate. I didn't argue. 40 years had taught me something. You don't win these at the table. You win them with the paper, later, when everyone stopped shouting. I didn't say no, I told them quietly. I said when. Nobody answered that. The pot roast got cold. Driving home, one thought kept circling. A gift has no due date. A loan does. I let it settle. It felt true. After that, the temperature in the family dropped. It happened the way these things do, not all at once, in small, deniable pieces. The next visit with the kids got canceled. Ellie had a thing, Sam had a cold, Brianna was too busy. Then the Sunday after that got canceled too. I called my son. Greg's 44, lives 2 states away, calls on holidays. He didn't pick up. He texted back hours later. Heard there's some money drama. Can we not drag me into it, Mom? Some money drama. As if I'd started a fire for fun. The story moving through the family wasn't mine. In the new version, I was the problem. Grandma's getting difficult. Grandma's confused about what she agreed to. Grandma's clutching her pennies while the grandkids go without. I heard it for myself one afternoon. I'd come by to drop off Ellie's birthday present and the side door was open. Brianna was on the phone in the kitchen talking to Lorraine. I know, Brianna said. She's comfortable, Lorraine. She doesn't even need it. She's just being dramatic. I set the present on the step. I didn't knock. I drove home and sat in the dark a while. I'm not too proud to tell you it hurt. It hurt like a burn. Comfortable. She doesn't even need it. My daughter had no idea what I needed. She'd never once asked. But I knew exactly what I'd given. To the dollar. That night I didn't sleep much. Around 2 a.m, I gave up and went to Tom's desk. I opened the second drawer. I took out the cream-colored folder. Inside was the single page. Derek's flourish of a signature still bold across the bottom. Tom's pen sat in its velvet sleeve beside it. I picked the pen up and held it, the way you hold a hand. I read the note from top to bottom, slowly, the way I'd read thousands of others. And somewhere in that reading, the hurt started turning into something colder and steadier. For 20 years, my family had seen a soft widow with a nice garden. They'd decided I was a sweet, forgetful old woman, and they'd built their whole plan around that. They forgot what I used to do for a living. That's all right, I didn't. I sat there until the sky went gray. I wasn't crying anymore. I was reading. There's a difference, and Derek was about to learn it. I made a list in my head of the calls I'd make when the bank opened. The first name on it was a man I'd hired in 1998, when he was 24, and didn't know a balance sheet from a bus schedule. I taught him everything. I wondered if he'd remember. The next morning I made coffee in my own kitchen with a drip machine that cost $29, and I got to work. I won't pretend I knew everything still. I'd been retired 3 years. Rules change. So I started where I always told my young officers to start, with the public record. It's all there, if you know where to look. County filings, business registrations, the quiet paperwork that follows a loan around like a shadow. I spent 2 hours at the library computer. The young man at the desk offered to help me navigate the internet. I thanked him and declined. I'd been navigating worse than the internet since before his mother was born. What I was checking was simple. When we'd signed that note, I'd secured it against the roastery's equipment. I wanted to know if that security was still on file, still valid, still mine. It was. There it sat, recorded and dated, exactly where I'd put it. 18 months, and not one person in that family had thought to look. Why would they? They thought the page in my drawer was a sentimental keepsake. I printed 2 copies, paid 80 cents, and folded them into my purse. A young officer of mine used to ask why I bothered with the boring paperwork when everyone was smiling. I always told her the same thing. The paperwork is for when they stop smiling. They'd stopped. I had the paperwork. I want to be honest about something. With that filing, I could have moved hard and early. A demand letter, a claim on the equipment. I'd done it to strangers 100 times. But this wasn't a stranger. This was my daughter's husband, and I'd ask nicely first because that's what you owe family, even family that's forgotten they owe you. The paper was my floor, not my first move. Now I needed to understand the rest of what they were up to. 3 days later, I drove to Brianna's to try, one more time, like a fool, to talk. I never made it inside. There was a new truck in the driveway. A Ford F250, the big one, dark blue, dealer plate still on. It gleamed like it had never seen a gravel road. Derek was hosing it down in the May sun. "Nice truck," I said through the car window. "Right? It's the shop's truck," he said, grinning. "Business expense. Gotta haul the green coffee somehow." I'm not a coffee expert, but I know what things cost. That truck was $40,000, easy. Probably more, loaded like that. "Business is good then," I said. "Booming, Mom. Honestly, never better. Booming. $40,000 of booming, parked next to a house with a leaning fence he'd been promising to fix for 3 years. I didn't say any of that. I smiled and asked if the kids were home. They weren't. Ellie was at a friend's, Sam at practice. Funny how they were never home anymore on the days I came by. I drove off slowly. In my rear view, Derek went back to washing his shop's truck. $180,000 I'd lent for a roaster. A $40,000 truck I was apparently helping buy. I didn't have the whole picture yet, but the edges were starting to show, and the edges were ugly. Brianna called that weekend. Her voice was different, smaller. "Mom, I'm sorry about Lorraine," she said. "She shouldn't have said that thing about shaming you." It was the first soft word in weeks. I sat down for it. "Thank you," I said. "That means something." "It's just been a lot," she said. "Derek's stressed all the time, the expansion, the investors, all of it." "What investors?" I asked. A small silence. "I don't know all the details," she said. "Derek handles the money side. He's always handled it. I do the marketing, the socials. I just trust him. I trust him." 3 words that have emptied more bank accounts than any thief. I asked carefully if she'd ever seen the books, the real numbers. "Not really," she admitted. "He says I worry too much. He's probably right." I heard something in my daughter then that I hadn't expected. Not greed. Fear, dressed up as loyalty. She was as much in the dark as I'd been kept. "Bree," I said, "promise me one thing. Ask to see the numbers, just once." "Mom, don't start. It's your name on things too," I said. "That's all." She changed the subject. We talked about Sam's soccer for 10 minutes and hung up. I felt a little tenderness for her, sitting there. She was being lied to in her own house. But she'd still called me selfish, and she still hadn't asked to see a single page. The following Thursday, the Hartwell Courier ran a piece on Vine and Ember. I read it at my kitchen table with my reading glasses and my second cup of coffee. There was a nice photo. Derek in an apron, arms crossed, standing in front of his big copper roaster. The headline called him a homegrown success story. The article was full of his voice. I could hear him saying every word. "I built this from nothing," he was quoted as saying. "No handouts, no outside money, just sweat and a good cup of coffee." No outside money. I set the paper down. I picked it up again to make sure I'd read it right. I had. $180,000 of my retirement, the entire reason that copper roaster existed, and he told the county paper there was no outside money. Family doesn't send each other invoices, but family will tell the newspaper they did it all alone. I wasn't angry exactly. Anger burns out fast. This was something with a longer fuse. I clipped the article. Not for a scrapbook. I had a feeling I'd want it later, sitting next to something else. Some claims look very different in print when you set the truth down beside them. The piece mentioned the roastery was planning a grand reopening in late June, with new investors expected to attend, right around when my deposit was due. I marked the date on the calendar. 2 days later, an email landed in my inbox that I was never meant to see. It came from Derek, sent to a long list of family and friends. The reopening invitation, balloons and a QR code and a line about celebrating everything we've built. But Derek, in his hurry, had attached the wrong file along with it. Under the cheerful invitation sat a second document, a pitch deck, the kind you show people you want money from. $40,000 of truck had already told me he was careless. This proved it. I opened it. It was slick. Photos, projections, a logo that had cost real money. Page 6 was titled, Financial Position. I read page 6 4 times. Clean balance sheet, it said. No long-term debt. Fully owner-financed. There was a slide showing the raise they were after. $600,000 to fund 3 more locations. Half from a new investor out of Columbus, the other half a senior line of credit from a bank. The investor's money was contingent on the bank's, a real number, a serious one. I sat very still. No long-term debt. I was the long-term debt. $180,000 of it, signed at this man's own kitchen table, secured and recorded in the county files. The single largest thing he owed in the world, and he'd erased me from his own story to chase $600,000 more. Here's what made it worse. If the loan didn't exist, then asking for it back made me a crazy, selfish old woman inventing a debt. The lie didn't just hide me, it rewrote me into the villain of my own life. I printed the deck. I put it in the cream folder, right behind the note. 2 pages now. One said I was owed, one said I didn't exist. They couldn't both be true, and I had a phone call to make. I read it again the next morning, hoping I'd been tired and wrong. I hadn't been. This is the part where, in the movies, the woman my age dabs her eyes and decides to forgive, because that's what good mothers do. I'm not in a movie. I'd spent 40 years watching what happens to people who forgive a debt that's being actively hidden from them. They don't get gratitude. They get erased. I went to the desk. I took out Tom's pen, the black one with the gold nib. I'd signed every important thing in my life with it. My marriage, my loans, my daughter's future. I held it a moment. Then I set it back in its sleeve and closed the drawer. I wasn't going to sign anything for anyone again. Not a check, not a co-signature, not a kindness with no due date. That well was closed. What I needed now wasn't a pen. It was the truth, in the right room, in front of the right people. And I needed someone on the inside who understood paper the way I did. I knew exactly who. I called the main line of Brightwater Regional, the big bank out on the highway, the one whose name had been on Derek's pitch deck as the lender for his new loan. "I'd like to speak with Walter Hendricks," I told the receptionist. "Tell him it's Myra Fuller. He'll know the name." She put me on hold. I listened to the tinny music and waited to find out if 40 years still meant anything. While the hold music played, I thought about a rule I used to teach. I ran a desk at a community bank for 40 years. I trained a lot of young officers, and the first thing I told every one of them was this: never lend money you aren't willing to collect. Not money you can't afford, money you aren't willing to chase. Because the moment you lend it, you find out who the other person really is. And sometimes the person you find out about is family. I'd broken my own rule once, 18 months ago, at a kitchen table, because my daughter cried. I told myself a good mother doesn't collect from her children. I was wrong about that. A good mother teaches her children that her word and theirs means something. There's no lesson in being a doormat. If you're sitting there right now thinking about money you lent that never came back, money you've been too kind or too scared to ask about, keep watching. By the end of this, I think you'll know what to do. And if this story is finding you at the right time, subscribe, so the next one does too. The music stopped. There was a click, and a voice I hadn't heard in 3 years said, "Myra Fuller, as I live and breathe." I smiled despite everything. "Hello, Walt," I said. "I need a few minutes of your time." Walt Hendricks was 24 when I hired him. He wore a tie his mother had clearly picked, and he couldn't read a cash flow statement to save his life. I taught him. For 11 years, he sat 2 desks down from me. When I retired, half the loan officers in this county had learned the trade at my elbow. Walt climbed the highest. He runs commercial credit at Brightwater now. "It's been too long," he said. "How are you? How's the garden?" "The garden's fine," I said. "I'm calling about business, Walt. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me if it's something you can't discuss." "Go ahead." "You're reviewing a loan for a coffee roastery, Vine and Ember, Hartwell." The pause told me plenty. Walt was never a good liar. I'd trained that out of better men and failed. "Myra," he said slowly, "you know I can't talk about an applicant's file." "I'm not asking you to," I said. "I'm telling you something you'll want to know before you fund anything. The owner of that roastery owes $180,000, secured, recorded to me." A long silence on the line. "To you," he said. "To me," I said. "I'm the lender he forgot to mention. I imagine his application says something different." I could practically hear him pulling a file toward him. "Myra," he said, "can you come in tomorrow and bring your paperwork?" I went in the next morning in my good blue coat with the cream folder under my arm. Walt's office had a window and a view and a nameplate that said Director. I felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. The boy had done well. He stood up when I came in. He still did that. "Sit down, Myra," he said. "Coffee?" "Not from a roaster I'm about to collect on," I said, and he laughed, and some of the tension left the room. I laid the note on his desk, then the recorded security filing, then the printout of Derek's pitch deck, opened to page 6. Walt read all 3 without a word. He's good. I trained him. This is real, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Every line, I said. Here's where I stand, he said. I can't share his file, but I can tell you that a committee cannot approve a new senior credit line on a balance sheet that's missing a secured debt this size. And his investors' money is riding on that line. The bank says no. The whole thing falls. That's not me doing you a favor. That's the law and the math. I know, I said. I wrote it the same way for 40 years. He almost smiled. When the diligence team verifies the financials, this surfaces, on its own, whether you push or not. I'm not asking you to push, I said. I'm asking you to do exactly what I taught you. Verify everything. I always do, Walt said. You made sure of that. I left his office lighter than I'd been in months. I hadn't set a trap. I just stopped hiding from the truth. The truth would do the rest. I should tell you who I actually am. The family never knew, not really. I started at Cedar Creek Community Bank in 1981, the same year Tom and I bought the house. I was a teller making $4 an hour. I took night classes in accounting while Brianna and Greg slept. By 1990, I was a loan officer. By 2000, I ran the commercial desk. For 40 years, my job was one thing. I decided which small businesses would live and which would die. I sat across from thousands of people just like Derek. Bakers, mechanics, a man who wanted to open the 3rd pizza shop on a 2-pizza street. I learned to tell the dreamers who'd make it from the ones who'd take your money and call you family. I knew the difference between a loan and a gift before most people learned to drive. So when Brianna cried at my table and I said we'd do it properly, I wasn't being cold. I was being exactly who I'd always been. I structured that loan the way I'd structured 10,000 others. Note, terms, security, recording. I did it out of habit, honestly. The way you lock a door, you've locked your whole life. I never expected to need it. But here's the thing about people who underestimate a quiet woman. They forget that quiet isn't the same as soft. For 20 years, my family saw a nice lady with a garden. The bank saw something else. They saw the woman who'd taught the man now reviewing Derek's loan. I wasn't the helpless one in this story. I never had been. They just hadn't been paying attention. A few days later, Walt called me back. His voice had the careful tone officers use when they found something. I want to walk you through where this goes, he said, so there are no surprises. Please, I said. Your note is what we call senior secured debt, he said. That means if the business ever fails, you get paid before almost anyone, before new investors. That's not a trick. It's what you set up in 2024. I remember, I said. His pitch deck says clean balance sheet, no long-term debt, Walt went on. But your debt is long-term and it's senior. The two things can't both be true. So what happens? When our diligence team confirms the numbers, they'll find the recorded filing, your filing. They'll ask him to explain it. He'll have 2 bad options: admit he hid a major debt or claim a recorded signed note isn't real. Neither one funds the loan, I said. Neither one funds the loan, Walt agreed. I want to be clear about something here. I never asked Walt to kill the deal. I never asked anyone to do anything but their job. I'd lent money, properly, on paper. I'd recorded it the way you're supposed to. All I was doing now was refusing to pretend it had never happened. That folder in Tom's desk wasn't a keepsake. It had never been a keepsake. It was the most powerful thing in the entire family, and I was the only one who'd known it. Walt, I said, what would you advise a borrower in his spot to do? Come clean, he said, fast. He won't, I said. He's never come clean about anything. Before we hung up, Walt gave me the choice. He's a fair man. I taught him that too. You've got options, Myra, he said. You could subordinate your note, step behind the new investor, let the deal go through. You'd look like the generous mother-in-law, and you might even get paid eventually. Might, I said. Or you could release it entirely, forgive the debt, walk away the hero, and lose $180,000 I'm counting on for my own home. That's the cost of the halo, he said. I won't pretend otherwise. I thought about it, genuinely, for about 10 seconds. I thought about the $48,000 deposit, about the sunny room at Lindenwood, about 30 years of night classes and locked doors and doing things properly. And I thought about the newspaper. No outside money, just sweat. No, I said. I'm not subordinating. I'm not forgiving. I want what I'm owed on the schedule we signed, not a penny more, not a penny less. That's your right, Walt said, fully. I'm not asking for more than I gave, I said. I'm asking for exactly what I gave. It felt good to say it out loud, clean. There's a reopening party, I told him, end of June. He's invited the investor and the newspaper. I think I'll go. Walt was quiet a moment. You sure? I'm not going to make a scene, I said. I won't have to. The numbers are already there. Walt called one more time before the party. This was the call that turned my sadness into something with a spine. I can't show you his statements, he said, but I can tell you the diligence raised flags. Real ones. Tell me what you can. A business that says it can't make a $5,000 loan payment, he said, spent money this year that didn't go into the business. How much? He chose his words like a man crossing a creek on stones. Tens of thousands, a vehicle, personal travel, a deposit on a property that isn't commercial. A vehicle, the $42,000 truck. Personal travel. I'd seen the photos Brianna posted. Maui in March, white sand, blue water, a caption about how hard they'd worked for this. $10,000. Easy. A property that isn't commercial. I didn't know about that one yet. A lake house, it turned out later. $25,000 down. I sat with the arithmetic. $70-some thousand gone to a truck and a beach and a lake. Money that flowed through the same business that couldn't pay me. It had never been can't. I want you to hear that clearly. It was never that they couldn't repay me. It was that they'd decided not to. They'd looked at a 70-year-old woman and a beach in Maui, and they'd chosen the beach. The hurt was real, but under it, finally, something steady. I wasn't the villain in this story. I never had been. I marked the reopening on my calendar and ironed my blue coat. 2 days before the party, they came to me, both of them. They must have felt the ground shifting. Derek did the talking. Brianna stood near the door with her arms crossed, not quite looking at me. Mom, we need to clear the air, Derek said. There's a rumor going around the bank, something about you and our loan. Is there? I said. You can't do this, he said. The warmth was gone now. You have any idea what you'll wreck? The investor walks, the expansion's dead, your grandkids' college is gone. Over what? Pride? Over $180,000, I said, that I lent in good faith. It was family money, he snapped. Family doesn't send each other invoices. There it was again, his favorite line. He'd built a whole world view on it. You keep saying that, I said quietly, but you went to a bank for $600,000 more. So you do believe in invoices, Derek. You just don't think mine counts. His jaw worked. Brianna spoke up from the door. Mom, please, don't blow up our whole life over this. I'm not blowing up anything, I said. I haven't called anyone a name. I haven't lied to anyone. All I've done is refuse to say a real loan isn't real. You're being so selfish, Brianna said. I looked at my daughter a long moment. I've heard that, I said. Sleep on it. The party's Saturday. I'll be there. I held the door open. They left. I did not raise my voice once. Brianna came back alone an hour later. Derek waited in the truck at the curb. I only have a minute, she said. She stayed on the porch. Is it true about the truck and the trip? That it came out of the business? So she'd started to wonder. I'd planted that. I think it did, I said. I think you should ask to see the statements, like I told you. Her face did something complicated. For 1 second, I saw the girl who used to climb into my lap when the world scared her. He said the truck was financed separately, she said. He told me Maui was a credit card we'd pay off. Maybe he did, I said gently. Did you see the statements? She looked at the truck, at Derek waiting, drumming the wheel, and I watched my daughter make a choice. She could have walked up that creek of stones. She could have asked one hard question in her own kitchen. Instead, she pulled her cardigan tight and stepped back. I'm sure there's an explanation, she said. I just wish you weren't doing this, Mom. It's selfish. She went back to the truck. I stood on the porch and watched them drive off. She'd been lied to. That was true. but she'd been handed the thread and she'd chosen not to pull it. Some people would rather keep a comfortable lie than survive an uncomfortable truth, even when it's their own mother on the other side of it. The reopening was set for Saturday at noon. I knew the place well. I'd watched it become what it was. Vine and Ember sat on Main Street in an old hardware store Derek had gutted and made beautiful. The big copper roaster stood in the front window like a trophy. My roaster, in a way. I'd bought it without knowing it. Brianna's posts counted down all week. New machines, live music, free pastries, and, in smaller letters, special guests from the business community. That meant the investor, a man named Howard Castellano, who'd flown in from Columbus. It meant the woman from the Courier, the one who'd written "No Outside Money." It meant half of Hartwell. Derek had built the perfect room. Lights, cameras, an audience. He thought it was his stage. The most important guest wasn't even on his list. A few miles away at Brightwater, a diligence team had already pulled a recorded filing with the name Fuller on it. The question was already loaded. He thought Saturday was a coronation. I knew it was a reckoning. I just hadn't decided yet how much I'd say and how much I'd let the paper say for me. I pressed my blue coat. I tucked the cream folder into my good handbag. And on Saturday morning, I drove to Main Street. I almost didn't go in. I sat in my car across the street for 10 minutes, watching people file through the door. Balloons, a man with a camera, Lorraine greeting guests like she owned the place. A voice in me said to go home, let the bank handle it, stay the quiet woman they expected. But I'd been quiet for 18 months, and quiet had gotten me erased from a newspaper. I wasn't going in to make a scene. I want that on the record. I'd promised Walt and I'd promised myself. The truth was going to be in that room whether I walked in or not. The diligence was done. The filing was found. The question was loaded into the chamber. I just decided I'd rather be standing there when it went off, not hiding at home, wondering. So I checked my coat in the mirror. I picked up my handbag with the cream folder inside. I crossed the street and I walked into my son-in-law's party. The shop was packed and warm and smelled like roasting coffee. It really was beautiful. I'll give him that. Derek worked the room in a crisp apron, shaking hands. Brianna handed out little cups. The kids weren't there, and I was glad. This was no place for them. Howard Castellano stood near the counter. The investor, gray suit, watchful eyes. The woman from the Courier had her notebook out. Everything Derek wanted was in that room. Lorraine spotted me by the door. "Myra," she said, loud enough for the people nearby. "I'm surprised you came. Some people only show up where there's free coffee." A few heads turned, a small laugh. I didn't take the bait. I just nodded and found a spot against the wall, near the window beside the big copper roaster. At noon, Derek tapped a spoon against a cup. The room hushed. "Thank you all for coming," he said. 5 years ago, I had a dream in an empty storefront. Today, look at this place. Applause. People ask me how I did it, he went on, warming up. And I tell them the truth. I built this with my own 2 hands. No handouts, no outside money. Just hard work and good coffee. No outside money. He said it to a room full of witnesses, to the investor, to the press. I felt the folder in my handbag against my hip. I didn't move. Across the room, Howard Castellano was smiling politely, but he had the look of a man who'd read a file that morning. A careful look, a waiting look. Derek raised his cup. "To the next chapter." "To the next chapter," the room echoed. I lifted my paper cup with the rest of them. I'd waited 40 years for moments like this to teach their own lesson. I could wait 5 more minutes. It was Howard Castellano who spoke next, not me. He just heard Derek tell a full room and a reporter that there was no outside money. I watched him set his jaw. A man putting his name on a deal does not like being made part of a lie in public. "Derek," he said, pleasant but firm, his voice carrying. "Before we celebrate too much, can I ask you something in front of everyone, since we're all family here, and since the paper's listening?" Derek's smile held. "Of course, Howard." "My team finished its review this week," Castellano said. "Standard diligence before I commit to a $600,000 deal, and we found something your application didn't mention." The room went quiet in a different way now. "There's a recorded loan against this business. Castellano said. Senior secured, $180,000. Filed in 2024. Your deck said no long-term debt. He paused. I don't like surprises with that many zeros. Derek's face did 3 things at once. There's an explanation. That's a family thing. It's not a real loan. It's recorded at the county, Castellano said. It looked real to my attorney. And then he did the thing I hadn't planned for. He looked around the room. The note's signed by a lender named Fuller, he said. Anyone here go by Fuller? Heads turned, slowly the way wheat turns in wind, toward the quiet woman by the window. I didn't rush. I'd learned long ago that the person who rushes looks guilty. I stepped forward. I set my handbag on the counter by Derek's beautiful copper roaster. I opened it and took out the cream-colored folder. I laid the single page on the counter, face up, where the light hit it. Derek's flourish of a signature sat bold across the bottom, next to mine. I'm Fuller, I said, Myra Fuller, his mother-in-law. You could have heard a sugar packet drop. He told you family doesn't send each other invoices, I said, calm as a Sunday. He's right, family doesn't. But banks do, and he signed mine 18 months ago with my late husband's pen at my own kitchen table. I tapped the page once. This is the outside money he says doesn't exist. Derek exploded. This is insane, he said too loud. She's confused. She's an old woman who doesn't understand business. Mom, tell them this is a misunderstanding. I said nothing. After everything we did for you, he went on, we gave you a place at our table, Sunday dinners, the grandkids, and you ambush me at my own party? I didn't bring this up, I said quietly. Mr. Castellano did. He read your own numbers. You poisoned the well, his voice cracked on the word. Lorraine stepped in beside him, chin high. Myra, you'd really shame your own daughter over money in public. Have you no decency? I turned to her. I didn't raise my voice. If anything, I lowered it the way you do when you want a room to lean in. Lorraine, I said. I asked privately, 4 times. I was called selfish. I was uninvited from my grandchildren's lives. I was told I was confused. I let it sit. I didn't bring the shame here. I just stopped absorbing it. Then I said the thing I'd been carrying since that drive home in the dark. A gift has no due date. A loan does. This was a loan. Nobody had an answer for that. There isn't one. Howard Castellano set his cup down on the counter, very gently. I think, he said, I'll be heading back to Columbus. Derek, we'll talk Monday. But I don't fund businesses that hide their debts from me or lie to a room full of people about them. He nodded at me once with something like respect, and he walked out. The woman from the courier was writing very fast. Brianna stood frozen by the pastry table, a tray of little cups going cold in her hands. She didn't say a word. She couldn't look at me or at her husband. The party was over. Everyone in the room knew it. I didn't gloat. There was no joy in it watching my daughter's face. I picked up the page, folded it, and put it back in the cream folder. I closed my handbag. Here's what happens now, I said to Derek in front of the room, because that's where he'd put me. You'll repay the note on the schedule you signed. $5,000 a month, 4%, like we agreed, not a penny more. And if I can't, he said. You bought a $40,000 truck, I said. You can sell a $40,000 truck. A murmur moved through the room. People do math fast when it's someone else's money. You'll keep my name off your failures from now on, I said. I'm done being the safety net nobody thanks. I turned to go. Then I stopped and said the last part softly just to him. I lent you that money because I loved my daughter, I said. Not because I was foolish. There's a difference. You spent 18 months betting they were the same thing. I walked to the door past Lorraine, who had finally run out of words. Outside, the June sun was warm. I stood on the sidewalk a moment and let it land on my face. Then I drove home, to the house I was about to leave, and I put Tom's pen back in its drawer for good. The deal died that Monday. Howard Castellano never wired a dollar. Without the $600,000, the second and third locations evaporated, the way most second and third locations do. Derek's choices got smaller after that. The bank wanted his existing loans cleaned up. The truck went first. I saw it on a dealer's lot within a few weeks, dark blue, still gleaming. The lake house deposit, I heard. He lost when he couldn't close. He started paying me that August, $5,000 and change, on the schedule he'd signed. It clears every month now. I don't send a reminder. I don't have to. He knows the difference between a gift and a loan now. It only cost him $600,000 to learn it. The courier ran a quiet correction. 2 lines near the back. The roastery had, in fact, received outside financing. It didn't name me. It didn't have to. Greg called me at the end of summer. My son, who didn't want to be dragged in. He'd heard the whole story by then. "I should have answered the phone, Mom," he said. "I'm sorry. I left you alone in it." "You did," I said. "Don't do it again." We talk every Sunday now. Brianna and I are another matter. She sent a text a while after that. "I'm sorry for how things went. I didn't know everything." That was all. I wrote back, "I know." And I meant it kindly. But I didn't say it was fine because it wasn't. She'd been handed the thread and she'd let go. That's not something a text undoes. We're not close right now. We may be again someday on honest terms. I'd like that. I won't beg for it. I moved into Lindenwood Commons that fall after the house finally closed. I'd held my spot with the partial deposit all along. The balance cleared with room to spare. My own money on time. My room faces east. The morning sun comes right in. I play bridge on Tuesdays. I'm ruthless. Some things you don't lose with age. The grandkids visit now on their own. Ellie's started asking me about money, how it works, what to watch for. I tell her everything. So here's what I'd tell you. After 70 years and one very expensive lesson, love your family with everything you have, but never lend what you aren't willing to call a loan, because the people who shame you for asking to be repaid are telling you plainly exactly who they are. That's my story. One signature, one phone call, and 40 years they forgot about. If it reminded you to put your own name first sometimes, share it with someone who needs it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.